It's my honor to speak with a member of the men's U.S. water polo team from the 2024 Paris Olympics, Dylan Woodhead, all the way from Greece. Dylan, thanks for making yourself available. It's the middle of the night there.
We're getting there, but it's good to be here. I'm really thankful to be here with you today, and grateful to share some stories and share my love of water polo. That'd be a good topic to end with today as well.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to just share with folks, whether they're familiar with water polo or they know your story, a little bit of your story by way of background. So Dylan Woodhead was born in San Anselmo, California. He grew up there he's got two siblings that are also water polo players, younger siblings, and his mom and dad were both athletes, one at Stanford and one at Cal. So that's a story in and of itself that they got married. But you grew up there. You went to Francis Drake High School. You eventually became a high school All-American playing water polo at Francis Drake, and then you matriculated in 2016 to Stanford. You became a starter by your sophomore year at Stanford, and were essentially starting for 3 years. Had a great career, finished as an honorable mention All-American for college water polo, and found time when you weren't busy, with practices twice a day to get a mechanical engineering degree and a master's in mechanical. Is that right?
Yep. Somehow mixed that in there. And I think I probably started the last 2 years, but benefited from some great teammates and a great team there at Stanford.
Well, you're just the classic example, Dylan, of the student athlete. And we'll talk about that later, how hard of a juggling act that is, no matter what anybody might think, whether you're at Stanford or you're at a school that's maybe a little less academic. I think it's really hard to be a Division I, student athlete. And so my hat's off to everybody that does that, whether they make All-American or they make it through 4 years, without crashing their autoimmune system or something like that. So it's great to have you with your background. Then you went on from Stanford to FINA, to international water polo, post-college, eventually got to Tokyo in 2020 for the Olympic Games there, where the U.S. team competed hard, finished outside the medals in 6th place, and you kept going and found a way to get back to the Games 4 years later, last summer in Paris, where you and your teammates were able to make it to the podium, which is huge. Got a bronze medal, 3rd place in a shootout with Hungary, another country with a very proud long water polo tradition. So you've had quite a ride, and we'll talk later whether you think you've got 2028 in you, one more Olympic rodeo. But I want to just stop because you're doing this from Greece. I wasn't making that up at the beginning of the interview. Because you're playing water polo overseas there in Greece for a pro team. Talk about that, about what town you're living in, how long you've been there, your team, your coach, and a little bit about pro water polo, since we don't have it in the States, how that sort of is a bit of a lifeline for U.S. water polo players between Olympic Games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm coming in from Athens, Greece. I play for a team called Vouliagmeni Nautical Club. It's a southern suburb of Athens. We compete in the 1st division of the Greek Water Polo League. There's about 16 teams in our league. The 2nd division has about 16 teams too, so maybe similar to a Premier League of soccer that many viewers may know. But we compete domestically in the Greek League and also internationally in some European competitions. So my team will get the chance to travel to Italy and Spain and some of these other European water polo countries and compete for European titles. And unfortunately, we haven't won anything, but I've been here for 3 seasons now. This is my 3rd season. And I've really made this place my home. I feel so grateful to have built relationships and friends here. They've made the life outside of water polo a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable being away from home. And I'm definitely super grateful for this experience holistically as a human being, in addition to a water polo athlete. So European water polo for American players has been super vital to our kind of growth as a national team. I think in the last 4 years, we've probably had anywhere from 20 to 30 players playing in Europe and numerous different countries. And for us, it just gives us an opportunity to get a lot more competition than we would back home. We get a lot more games out here. We get trainings against some of the best players in the world. And it just gives us a chance to improve and grow our skills. And I think it was an invaluable experience for a lot of us in preparing us for this last Olympic Games. And I think it's a great way for American players to improve. I definitely hope we can develop our own league or our own solutions back home so we don't have to export our American talent to Europe for eternity, I guess. But as of now, it's a great way for us to continue to get better. And I'm super grateful for my team here. And yeah, it's been an awesome experience.
You told me in a previous conversation only two American players per European club, right? So you can't stock up with your U.S. team on one club. No one can load up. Is that correct?
Exactly. So actually, each domestic league will have different requirements. So in the Greek league, we're only allowed 2 foreigners. So I played with another American one season. I played with a Serbian teammate now, and then the rest of my teammates are Greek. But in the Italian league, you can have up to 4 foreigners. In the Spanish league, I think it's 3. So it differs by kind of domestic league. Within European competition, you can play with as many foreigners as you want. So that's one wrinkle to it. But it has been more difficult to team up with American athletes in Europe. We definitely have maybe a teammate or two. But I've benefited from having a lot of Americans in Athens because a lot of our a lot of the opposite teams that we compete against in the Greek league are also based in Athens. So we'll get together on weekends and we'll have some common training here and there, but we'll also just build our relationships outside of the pool, which is really important too.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. All the guys meet up at the Acropolis.
Yeah, exactly. The Acropolis and for some Souvlaki at a taverna. It's been a great experience.
About how many of your U.S. water polo teammates are playing in Europe right now?
Right now, it's a little less. I think we're about 7 or 8, maybe a little, yeah, probably about 8, I think. We have a couple guys in Australia too, so a little bit of a mix.
Well, I think that's just helpful for everybody that wasn't familiar with the way that water polo worked. It isn't a sport with a U.S. professional league, and there are other sports like it, but things seem to be changing. Certainly, swimming has developed a professional, circuit, and that didn't exist either. Talk a little bit about your coach of your professional team. I know you like him a lot. He's very well regarded within international water polo.
Mm-hmm. So my head coach for my Woodhead team is a guy named Vladimir Vujasinovic. He's been an amazing player for the Serbian team for many years. So he's coached me for 3 seasons. He played my position. He was a defender. I'm a defender. So I've learned a lot of incredible skills from him. It's amazing to have kind of the respect he commands among our team just because of how great of a player he was. But he's taught me a lot about leadership, a lot about leading without having to speak, leading with presence. He's been instrumental in kind of teaching me a lot of the mentality you need to be a great player, but also the mentality great teams have. So I'm super grateful for my experience playing under him. Again, he was a beast in the pool. He was one of the strongest guys I think a lot of the water polo players that played against him ever guarded or played against. And just seeing some highlight videos on YouTube of him play is also very inspirational, but very grateful to have him as a coach.
Wow. What I hear you saying about what you appreciated about him was he really was teaching you, coaching you on the mental side of the game, even though he's physically a very gifted guy himself. And people don't know you are 6'7", right? For the record.
For the record, yes.
You're a big guy. Certainly, you can be physical, but the mental side of water polo, like a lot of sports at that level, kind of separates maybe winning from losing. Is I'm guessing why he prioritizes coaching you on the mental side of water polo, how to lead, how to hang in there.
For sure. So I think we've had a young team the last 3 seasons, and that just makes the mental side of our team even more vital and important to our success. And I think the approach to the game, the approach to a possession, the approach to even a movement is something that he doesn't have to preach, but he shares with his intensity and how he coaches. And I think that's been really important. Just you can go into a game with X's and O's and tactics, or to be honest, in a lot of problems in your life. But if you go with like an aggression and a ferocity and like a will to succeed and execute and give your best, I think that can overcome a lot of the issues that you may have from tactical disadvantages or communication. So that will is something I think he's kind of instilled in our mental psyche, and it's definitely something I'll bring with me moving forward in my athletic career and beyond.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad I asked you those questions about what makes him special. So let's just transition back into your timeline, kind of, growing up, pre-high school. I just mentioned for everybody that's listening that you're 6'7", and the obvious question was to me, why not basketball or men's volleyball? Like, can't teach tall, they like to say. And tell people, why water polo? Why not those other? You'd have a natural advantage, right?
That's too easy. I was an awkward kid. I grew like 5 inches in a couple of months, I think. And I remember the baseball coach would make fun of me because I couldn't run. And okay, I love to play basketball and baseball. Would have loved to have continued to play that sport, but I started swimming from a young age because my mom was a swimmer, and I think it's a great sport to start out with for any kid. It's great to learn how to swim. It's a life skill you need to have. But I continued to grow up and play these ball sports, and then I found water polo, which was a combination of both. So I could kind of use my skills I had in swimming, and I think ball sports are a lot more fun. So I kind of fell in love with water polo immediately. And then the thing that really made it stuck was the community. And to be honest, as a parent of a kid or a kid looking for a new sport, I think finding a place that you fit in, finding a place where you're surrounded by great role models and great people that like to be kind to people and work hard, I think that's more important than any optimal sport you may find. So I was really grateful with the water polo team I found and the community I fell in. My family fell in, and I think that kind of led us to grow into water polo athletes.
Yeah, you had mentioned to me before that you kind of discovered that community when you were around 11 or 12. Your family found a water polo group, a community where you like the families, just good facilities, all that stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll shout them out. Sleepy Hollow Aquatics. They're from San Anselmo, California. They have great facilities, but really the coaches were just great people. They cared about the kids they raised first before the water polo. The teammates I had initially were all like-minded. They all wanted to work hard in school and work hard in the pool. And I think that makes it easy to find motivation. And I think having that community that supports athletes and sports students was really instrumental to my development as a person. And I think if you can develop well in that way, the athletics become a lot easier. And I was obviously I benefited from a lot of support from my family and this community. And again, I'm super grateful for everything they've given me.
Right. And your parents in that regard, your mom was a college swimmer at Stanford. Your dad was in rowing at Cal. So they really understood those are sports that there's a lot of practice time. You don't show up and beat people without putting in a lot of hours, and rowing, especially a suffering sport, for 6 or 7 minutes of glory, 2,000-meter race. So describe really briefly your training routine growing up before you got to Stanford, going to Francis Drake High School, your social life, et cetera. Was there balance? Did it become more and more, focused on water polo in terms of meets and practices and juggling that with school?
Yeah, I think looking back on that time period now, it's kind of crazy what my family was able to accomplish with me, my brother, and my sister. We had, going from basketball to baseball practice, we had morning gym training at times before high school. And okay, a lot of the times I was walking to these practices, or I would drive with my brother, but I felt like we were always constantly doing something. And I felt like that kind of, I don't know, it's not a circus, but the busyness of that and having to succeed in school and wanting to succeed in school, it definitely instilled a lot of time management skills that I think proved to be super helpful later on. But yeah, we had a lot of double days, a lot of tired, chlorine filled kids at the dinner table late at night. The training schedule is definitely significant. And again, yeah, my parents were really instrumental in allowing us to do that, and super grateful for it. I don't know if I quite answered the exact routine question, but it was a hectic time, but we put a lot of work in, and yeah, I think it built a good foundation that we were able to use later on.
All I can say is, as the parent of four, three pretty active athletes, I was most grateful the day that my oldest got his driver's license, and
Yep.
life started to change as far as practices and all that stuff. I'm sure your mom and dad can identify. So you graduate as an All-American from Francis Drake, and you go on to Stanford. Let's circle back to that student athlete, thing. I mean, and you got an engineering degree and played at a really high level college water polo where there's a lot of expectations. You're kind of one of the top four. So what was that like, trying to juggle those things? And did it ever bite you where you got sick? You just ran yourself down. You hit a wall.
Oh yeah. I think the toughest moment was my fluid dynamics final in my junior year. That class was, I think, Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings at like 8:30 a.m. And it was funny because I was taking that class with a couple other student athletes, one other women's water polo player and one men's swimmer. And a lot of the days, I think 2 days of the week, we would show up from morning practice after getting up at 5:45 a.m. and training an hour and a half, getting to class on like a couple hours of sleep, exhausted and trying to focus and learn. So that fluid dynamics final was one of the toughest parts of my life. That was for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of tough parts. And I think going through those tough moments with the people you went through with, whether it's your water polo teammates going through a really tough swim set, or, to be honest, kind of that student athlete group I worked through a lot of engineering problem sets with, you really create a strong bond with those people that is pretty special, and one that builds a really strong relationship that you can be grateful for the rest of your life. And those challenges are part of, I don't know, being a student athlete at Stanford. And I wouldn't have it any other way, I guess. That's what I'd say about it.
Pretty amazing. There's thousands of you every year that keep doing it, keep coming back, because it is hard. It's really hard. I've heard that from people even that had good careers. It's one thing if you suffered and you never got to start or whatever, but I've heard a few people who won some awards and maybe won a title and talked about the toll that it took. Stopping short of saying they wish they hadn't done it, but just it comes with a cost. And I think there are life lessons there to be learned. So talk about this applies to now, this applies to the Olympics, and applies to Stanford. Your mental framework, you talk about community. That's one leg of the stool. It seems like you're leaning into people. You can't do this thing by yourself. You have to lean into the people that are closest to you.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll finish with the people piece. I'll finish the people piece I was trying to say earlier. And again, I just think having the support group there is so vital to get you through those hard times and those bumps in the road, and to understand that this is a short-term thing. And when you have someone that can support you through those and allow you to take a deep breath and zoom out and appreciate the things you can be grateful for, I think that really has helped me get through a lot of the difficulty I've had and the challenges that have come from my sport and school, which in the grand scheme of things, I'm very grateful to have. So the people, have been vital to my ability to get through those tough moments. And in terms of tough moments, you remember the 5:45 wake ups and you roll out of bed and you're like, your head is in your hands. You're like, oh, I got to get up and do this. But for me, I think I've had a couple goal setting frameworks that have really helped. I've tried to have my outcome goals. So kind of the big picture things I want to achieve. And those are your gold medals or your championships or whatever. And then I break those down into little process goals, which are kind of smaller things, more bite size that I can try and focus on my day to day, on my month to month. So when I have these little things to focus on, it kind of makes those big things a lot more manageable. And it honestly occupies my mind at times, so I don't have to think too big picture and get overwhelmed. I'm also a big proponent of self-talk. I definitely have some negative talk self-times, and I think everybody does. I love this one video from Aaron Donald in his Super Bowl. He was verbally talking his self-talk out loud, and I think that's one of the most powerful things that I've been trying to use more recently. I think saying these positive mantras that you have, or these focuses you have for a game or a possession or a day, and having to hear them yourself, I think it gives me a lot of confidence, and I think it gives me a lot of motivation. And I'm super grateful to have that as a tool in my back pocket, to kind of help me motivate me and get through those hard times too. And you have a couple silly mantras too, like it can be like that sometimes, or it is what it is, where you accept things the way they are, and that you accept that they're out of your control, and you try and move on. There's a lot of things in life, a lot of things in sports that are out of your control, and if you spend too much time and energy and effort and pain trying to control them, it's going to cause a lot of issues. So being able to recognize when things are out of your control and take a deep breath, and move on, I think that's a great skill to have too. So
really appreciate everything you just touched on. For everybody that's listening, the self-talk thing, maybe to some people sounds a little bit silly or weird to be talking to yourself out loud, but I think you would encourage people to try it. Just try it and see what happens.
Try it, watch the video, and try it. And it may be on your way to work, it may be in a game, but I think it helps me. So give it a try.
Going back to outcomes and process, I like, you're such an engineer. You're way more methodical than me. You broke it all down into two big categories, but it's important to get the two categories. I understand now, finally at my stage, because process is something you can control. You can control how hard you practice, how often you practice, your diet. You can control those kinds of things. You cannot control outcomes, can you? You can be ready to go, the best shape you've ever been in as a water polo player. It does not mean your team's going to win. You can't control who you're going to face. You can't control and we'll talk about that when we get to the games in Tokyo and Paris, facilities, travel, sleep, the village. Those are things beyond your control, but they affect outcomes.
Big time.
So it's helpful, isn't it, when you can begin to accept, I can't control that anyways. I get some peace of mind worrying about stuff that I don't have any control over. But it's hard.
It's an interesting dilemma, I would say, especially at the Olympics, because these things are out of your control, and they can truly have an impact on you. You can just have one bad night's sleep on a cardboard bed and you feel miserable the next day, or you wake up with a cough, or you sit on a bus for an hour and a half. Like, these are all things that affect you physically, but at the Olympic Games, you're like, I don't want it to affect the outcome I have. Like, I've trained my whole life for this. I have to go out and execute. I don't want to have any regrets. And I think we'll talk about that later. The difference between, accepting what you can't control, but not letting those negative things that happened affect how you want to execute in the pool in whatever sport you are. So,
really good stuff. So that's a good segue. You graduate from Stanford. you decide to keep playing water polo. You could just get an engineering job in the Bay Area. There's nothing that says you're gonna keep going. You've had a good career at Stanford, but you decide you want to stick around and compete and train and maybe get on that Olympic squad in 2020, the Tokyo Games. Talk about that, because there's no guarantee you're going to get a spot on the team. You had to do some calculus in terms of how much you were going to give up. But what were those 2-3 years like from graduation to Tokyo?
Yeah, well, the world was going through a pretty crazy time too with the coronavirus. So there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of craziness, and it felt like water polo was the one thing I kind of knew what was going on. So it gave me a little peace in that. It gave me a little focus to have during COVID when we were all at home, and being able to work out with my siblings, I think, was fun. And for us, it was kind of the start of the European migration for American athletes. A lot of the pools were closed during COVID. So our head coach, Dejan Udovičić, encouraged a lot of our players to go to Europe. And that's how I first ended up in Greece. And that year was really interesting for me because my whole life I had tried to balance academics and athletics. And like before the Olympic Games and that year specifically, you could really try and focus on one thing. And that was something new for me. So I really tried to go all in and commit myself fully. And you're working out on your own. You're working out with your professional team. You're having Zoom calls with your national team. You're managing your diet. You're making, I don't know, strategic plans or goals, whatever you are. So that year was a year definitely shaped my future, I guess, and my athletic career. And it was definitely physically and mentally demanding. And it was, looking back on that time, was pretty crazy.
So you eventually get to a place, you go to an Olympic camp for the team to be picked, right, for Tokyo, to qualify as one of the best, 10 guys. How big is your squad? 10, 12?
We're 13 right now. It changes per tournament, but the Olympic Games are 13 athletes.
Okay. So when and where was that Olympic camp where you had to, try and make the cut?
Yeah, so the process kind of is a 4-year process. It goes through the whole year leading up to the Olympics, but culminated in like a month and a half long training camp. We were at home for a couple of weeks in Los Angeles, kind of our base. Then we were training in Europe with European teams. And kind of the last deciding moment was actually a international competition, like a tune-up tournament, where all the athletes competed. And it was called the World League Super Final. We ended up getting silver. We got second that year, and we were training we were in Tbilisi, Georgia, actually. So it was a month and a half long decision process. It felt like it culminated into a couple games we played in Georgia. And then the selection process was in a hotel conference room, 11 p.m. at night, the day before we all fly home. And it was a pretty crazy experience. I guess crazy is not a descriptive enough word. Memorable. And it's hard because you train your whole year, your whole life alongside American teammates that you love and support. And when it comes down to that last cut, you have guys that are deserving, guys that are your best friends that aren't going to make it, and vice versa. And I was very fortunate to make the team. And again, those are things you do everything right. And I don't know.
Yeah. You can't control the outcome. You can't guarantee who coach is going to pick. So what date was that that you found out you made it?
I want to say July 2nd, 2021. So a couple of weeks before the Olympics. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful for everybody to know. So you find out you've got a spot just weeks before the games, going to Tokyo. Talk about Tokyo. Talk about games in a bubble. But the Olympic Village and your experience. Had you been to Japan for polo before? What do you remember?
Yeah, I I had been to Japan with my Stanford team, actually. We went on an international tour, trained with the Japanese national team in 2018, summer 2018. What an experience that was. It's one of my favorite places to visit. I can't wait to go back. I loved it. And Tokyo was, for the Olympic Games, was just the same. People say, oh, it was a weird Olympics. It was the COVID Olympics. It was a bubble. It was all new to me. I had no idea what to expect. So everything seemed amazing and great. And I think the village was beautiful and super new and very organized. And the dining hall was amazing. And I think that was a lot of kind of the main parts of the village for us. We had a great coordination effort from Team USA to give us a lot of recovery equipment and nutrition. It was definitely hot. The rooms were hot. So we had to manage that as well. We were walking a good ways every day. But it's the Olympic Games. So you enjoy those parts, but you're there to compete. And that was our focus for sure.
Yeah, the rooms are hot for everybody. That's your consolation. They're hot for your opponents as well, right?
Yep.
How was your bed long enough?
I'm actually not that picky of a sleeper. People get on me because I don't mind hard beds. My bed was long enough. It was on a cardboard platform, which everyone's like, oh my gosh, a cardboard bed. No,
Wow.
it's a fine bed. It's not as comfy as your great mattress you have at home, but when you're at the Olympic Games and you're training hard and playing hard, I slept okay for the most part. I didn't complain.
So it was, in spite of pandemics stuff, it was a good experience and very good facilities. I hear you saying in terms of what the Japanese had built, for the athletes' experience. And you like Tokyo, fascinating city. So the team finished sixth, just without dwelling on outcomes too much. But what's the quick story for a team that's won a lot of medals over many, many Olympics? What happened in those Olympics that were different? Could you have had a different outcome?
Yeah. So my understanding of how the outlook was going into the Tokyo Olympics is we had a pretty outside shot of competing for a medal. We as a team kind of knew that. We were a very young, new team. We knew we would have a shot at the medal round. We had to execute in our group play. So the Olympic water polo, you have a couple groups of 6. If you're top 4 in your group after group play, you compete in the quarterfinals. So we had to basically beat 2 teams in our group to kind of guarantee a quarterfinal game. So we ended up beating South Africa, which we definitely expected, and we had to beat Japan in Japan, which was one of the most stressful games of the tournament for us. It was the first game too. And we pulled that one out. So we knew we'd get a quarterfinal game, and in a quarterfinal game, anything can happen. And that was kind of our focus. We hadn't won a quarterfinal game in a major tournament in a tremendous amount of years as a USA water polo team. We played a great Spanish team and I think lost by 2 or 3. We had chances in that game. We probably didn't have the experience, maybe didn't have the quality to finish, like to expect to beat Japan, but to expect to beat Spain, but we had a shot. We lost. We ended up beating a good Italy team in the consolation semifinal and losing to Croatia. So that was a lot of words, but basically I would say the summary is we went into the tournament thinking we had to have a shot at it.
Yeah.
And it was starkly different than how we went into Paris. We went into Paris with a lot higher expectations, a lot more confidence, a lot more experience. And I think those all helped us in our journey in Paris.
Yeah, and there was carryover in terms of the 2020 team. A lot of those athletes stayed around, matured, and came back for Paris.
I want to say almost all of them.
So it was just an older, more mature team. So before we talk about Paris, you and I have talked about this. I really want you to talk about the game itself of water polo at the elite, at the Olympic, at the international level, the professional level. There's a lot of big guys like you. Your armor plate is a Speedo swimsuit. 3/4 of your body is below the water, and it's hard to see if you're a spectator. But as you know, and and I know to a lesser degree, it's a really violent game. It's a very physical game, and you've got no protection, in terms of the physical side, punching, scratch. So talk about that, especially at that level. And, you can put names out there if there's certain countries that are more dirtier than others, or no, I'm not trying to guide this conversation, but you got to share with people how physical it is and violent, and also how exhausting a water polo match is at that level. How much calorie burn one match takes out of you. What do you do how depleted are you? Are you cramping? Are you?
Hmm. Yeah, I think water polo is one of the toughest sports I think you could play. The easy part in our game for a lot of the game is the swimming part, which I think a lot of people have. It's very difficult, and it's something that we have to learn to do and learn to be super fast and explosive and swim for a long time. The fun part is when you get into the physicality of the game. I like to think we have 6 guys that play in the field with one goalie, and each one-on-one matchup is almost like an offensive and defensive lineman. You're jockeying for leverage at all times. You're trying to attack people's momentum. You're pushing, you're shoving, you're kicking off. It's a very physical sport. It's almost like the hand fighting you see in a wrestling or a jiu-jitsu, but it's under the water. There's a lot of explosiveness you need in order to generate the power to elevate out of the water, to pass or shoot the ball. My position kind of guards what a center in basketball would be, the guy that's closest to the net. He's the biggest. He covers a lot of water. He can score the ball in many ways. And that battle is one of the most entertaining things to watch in water polo. And I'm biased, but I think it's a pretty fun thing to watch in sport. It's very physical, that battle. And okay, in the Olympic Games, when there's a lot of pressure, and if you punch somebody, you get a red card, and your team has a huge penalty for it. Maybe it's a little less dirty or physical. And in other areas of water polo and the domestic leagues in Europe, you can get some vicious like eye gouges or punches or fish hooks, which is when I don't know. There's a lot of physicality, but at the Olympic Games, I think it cleans up a little bit just based on the stakes. It's a game that I've come to love, the physicality as well. And it's not for the faint of heart. I guess that's a good way to finish that sentiment.
Let's drill down a little bit further on that. So again, just to get people inside the game, inside your world. Mm-hmm. Your kidneys aren't protected. Your ribs aren't protected. Can you get a cracked rib in water polo?
Oh, yeah. People have heard the worst is the knees to the ribs. I think that has broken ribs in the past to a couple of our players. A lot of the impact injuries come from grabbing shoulders, or maybe you have some elbows or punches to the head if someone's getting dragged underwater. I've even had a couple of fingers bitten off, not bitten off, but bitten. That wasn't fun, but it's definitely physical. In the most part, though, I think it's a pretty safe sport in terms of major injuries. We're not tearing ACLs. We're not out for 12 months. I think the most common overuse injury is maybe some shoulder issues with throwing and swimming. Mm-hmm. So I would say in the grand scheme of sports, you're relatively safe. Definitely when you get to these higher levels where people's livelihoods are on their line, this is how they make their money, this is how they feed their families. It can be physical to try and gain advantages. I don't want to paint it as this gnarly UFC fight. It definitely happens. But in general, I think it being in the water, it protects us in a lot of ways too.
It's cage fighting without the cage, and you get the benefit of a little bit of water to buffer the impact, but that's about a little bit. Especially your defender, you cover the whole player. You're covering the offensive guy that sits right in front of the net, typically, mm-hmm. right? Have you gotten black eyes?
Yeah, I played in the last national team tournament with a pretty black eye for a couple games. It was pretty easy for my mom to see on the video stream, though, so she didn't mind.
What about noses? Any fractured nose? Again, you're getting an elbow from an offensive player that's turning to try and get that ball around.
say I've accidentally broken a nose, and I've had a couple splits for some stitches on eyelids, and I think broken eardrums are common if you get a good elbow to the ear as well. Again, not common, but they've
They
happened in
happen.
my 15-year career. So.
And concussions with the force of the ball. Do you get concussed with a water polo ball if you take one in the temple, even with those hats?
If you're not prepared and braced for it, it can happen for sure. And I think that's something to be aware of in the developing levels as well. But usually the force from shooting comes when you're older, and a lot more strength and muscles come with that as well. So it definitely happens, but I wouldn't say a lot less than other major American sports.
Yeah, sports with balls. I'm with you. I like sports with balls, team sports with balls. So we're on the same page there. Volleyball people get concussed. It's not as well known as sports, like football and maybe basketball, but it happens where there's a ball traveling at high velocity. If it hits somebody in the head before they can get their hands up to block it. So that just goes with the territory in a sport like water polo as well. So this is really helpful to talk about all of that stuff and get people inside of that water polo world, and then kind of finish with talking about Paris and you being a defender and me watching film of your team's matches in Paris. I saw a little bit of it live, but I've gone back and watched it. And Alex Bowen, your offensive hole player, is a beast. And I thought about you having to practice, guard him in practice. Is it as tough as it looks like when you're trying to cover Alex?
Yeah, so imagine Alex, he can play, we call it center. He can play center, but he's so powerful as an outside shooter that he doesn't even play center for our team. So traditionally, he does go in and play a little bit, but he's a difficult cover for anyone in the world. I think he has one of the fastest velocities on a shot out of anyone. And he's a tough cover and an even better guy, another Stanford Cardinal, a great teammate. One of the best centers in the world right now, his name's Ben Halleck. He's another American teammate. He is a very tough cover. I actually had to guard him for 4 years in Stanford too, so we battled quite a bit.
Wow.
But a lot of centers have very different styles. You have some huge guys that don't move so much, but they take so long to get around that they can be difficult. You have guys like Ben that are really good at using leverage. His dad was an offensive lineman, so he understands kind of how to move people based on the leverage you can earn in the water. You have centers that are very explosive, that are stepping away from defenders. So I know I painted it as a physical sport, but there's a lot of incredible skill, and I was just at one position. So
yeah,
the centers are tough covers, and I enjoy it though. It's one of my I don't know. One thing I try to take pride on is being impactful on defense. I think that's a good selfless skill for me to have as a defender, I guess.
And playing against the best. It's great to say you have played against the best offensive players, at the international level with those guys that you just named. So let's shift to Paris on that note.
Yes.
Specifically let's go to the bronze medal match against Hungary with the time that we have. I watched your teammate Alex Bowen with his back to the net and a defender on his back and his head underwater backhand a ball into the net.
That's exactly the center play. You're totally right. Yes. So he was a beast that game. That game was tough because we had played Serbia 2 days earlier in the semifinal, and obviously we want to win that game and play for gold. We really did not play well against Serbia at all. We had a poor showing. We didn't have a lot of things clicking on offense. And there was definitely a huge disappointment after that game. It's something we couldn't dwell on long because we had one of the most important games of our lives, if not the most, only 2 days later, Hungary in that game you're just now describing. So the transition from that disappointment to focus was difficult, but something we really needed to do. I think Alex Bowen did a great job coming out in that game and setting a tone for a lot of the rest of our team to show that we're here, we're in this, we want to win this and bring home this medal. So I think him and all of our players, I think the Paris Olympics was a huge team effort. We didn't have really one super dominant player that scored all the goals for our team, and that was a strength for us. And that game with Hungary, I think we were close the entire game, up one, down one. I think by the end of the fourth, we were down one and needed to tie it. And we hit a huge goal to answer. And obviously, Adrian Weinberg, our goalie, had an amazing tournament, and he took it home in that penalty shootout. He blocked 3 straight penalties, didn't even give Hungary a breath. And Alex Bowen, I think, sealed the deal. And that was just an incredible moment. It's very surreal to think about, but luckily we have some photos from it, a couple.
It was really inspiring. Alex's shot, backhand was inspiring, but Johnny Hooper was inspiring. Hannes Dalber is an amazing water polo player.
Yeah,
and
I would put serving there too. He's just so solid for us, and we have great centers that played well the entire tournament. It's crazy to think about because right now that medal is the pinnacle of my water polo career, and it was such an amazing collaborative team effort to have, and something that I don't know, I can look back on so fondly even now.
Well, I could keep talking, I could keep going here, but I think what we want to do is wind up at this point with hopes that you're thinking about LA 28, about possibly being a part of that. Is that safe to say?
Of course. Yeah. I've been very fortunate to have met a lot of great role models in my life. One of them is a former USA player here in Athens, Greece, actually. His name's Chris Humbert, and he played for Team USA water polo in Atlanta. And he raves about how incredible it was to be able to play in from your home crowd in your home country. So I definitely think I would love to try and contribute in any way I can.
Well, my fingers are crossed. It would sure be fun to see you here in LA, in my hometown, and maybe meet some of these teammates as well. I'll certainly come hang around the practice pool and see if they'll let me in to meet some of your teammates and say hi. I've just
our doors are open, but we might have to give you a Speedo and get you in for some reps. If you want.
Oh boy, that's too much information for people that are listening to this. So last note. So in the interview notes at the bottom of this YouTube interview, Dylan, we'll put some. If you've got a passion project, something water polo or beyond that you really believe in, we want to direct people that hear the interview to go to that website if it's a cause. Is there anything that you're, excited about beyond professional water polo?
Yeah, I definitely worked on a lot of things during my time. I built a couple stats websites to help us scout. I built a marketplace to try and help athletes get connected for private lessons. I was very fortunate to be one of the first sponsored athletes by one of the biggest American water polo brands, Cap 7. They make the best water polo ball in the business. And right now I'm actually able to design some of my own water polo equipment. And I've partnered with them to bring it to market. And I know not everyone's a water polo player, but they sell Cap 7 sells paddle boards and water bottles and great equipment all around. And I'm really excited to bring this product that I've been working on for a year or two to market. I think it's a great training tool that allows athletes to improve their shooting, to improve their release skills, I would say. I think there's a lot more information coming out on that, but I think that would be the one thing I'd love to share with everybody.
So we'll put Cap 7's, the URL to their website, into the interview notes for anybody that is listening to this. And we will continue to stay in touch with you. we might have to do another interview, one more before if you make the 28 team and you decide you're going to do this, you've got to promise you'll do one pre-Olympic interview,
Deal.
before LA 28. And with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you on behalf of
Deal.
everybody that watches this interview.
Thank you, Tim. I had an awesome time. Everyone, go try water polo. It's a sport that I've grown to love. I think it's an amazing, healthy sport. Get some good sunshine, and I can't believe I just signed off with that. But I really appreciate the call, Tim. It's been awesome.